Welcome back to Gold Shields. I'm Dan Murphy, along with my co-host and partner in crime, Tom Smith. Every week, we bring you the best, most compelling true crime stories as told by the mouths of the detectives and investigators who made those cases. And today's guest is going to be phenomenal, Stephen Monteiro from the U.S. Secret Service. We can't wait for him. But first, Tom, how you doing this morning, buddy?
Everything's great, pal. Looking forward again, as always, to a amazing show we got coming up.
Outstanding. And as I enjoy my Bone Frog coffee here, let's talk a little bit about the National Law Enforcement Officers Hall of Fame. Tom, tell us about what we learned this week from them.
You know what? They're one of our closest companies, our closest groups. Megan Stockberger, Adam Davenport are dear friends of ours and supporters of the show. And we want to get that message out about how important the National Law Enforcement Officers Hall of Fame is and what they're doing for so many officers to get recognized. You know, you turn the news on, a lot of times you just hear the bad stuff, the bad stories, and you don't understand or don't hear about the amazing, heroic work going on every day in this country by law enforcement officers. And they bring that out with an amazing event that they have this year. Is going to be in Fort Worth, Texas, March 22nd, 2024, which we will be at doing our show. So we can't say enough about that. And, we're proud to be part of them.
Yeah, and Megan and Adam, the founders of the Hall, are the most selfless people you'll ever meet. They're the two people who run an organization where it's not about them. It's all about the inductees and the men and women of law enforcement. So we love them. We want to help spread the word. And right now, there's an open call, and there will be for some time, but it'll stop for nominations. If you know somebody whose career, whose individual exploits, or for a variety of reasons, and you can look it up on the Hall and their website. It's National LEO halloffame.com. Look up the parameters by which you can nominate somebody and nominate somebody who truly deserves to have their work memorialized forever in the Hall. Let's get this to be a real big national organization where the men and women are getting the respect and the recognition that they deserve.
Absolutely. And we're going to push it. You know, it's going to be on our website, it's going to be on our social media platforms, and we're going to mention it throughout the rest of the year going forward with the nomination process, where they're at, and get the recognition that these officers, men and women in blue, deserve.
Okay, so remember that, National Law Enforcement Officers Hall of Fame. And with that, we'll be back in just a minute with our guest, Stephen Monteiro. Be right back. And we're back at Gold Shields. I'm Dan Murphy, along with Tom Smith, and our guest today, Stephen Monteiro. We are so excited to have him on. He's not only a retired Secret Service agent, but he's also the author of the book, The Gray Bird of Baghdad, which he's going to tell the story about today. A very, very interesting gentleman, and his story, I can't wait to hear it, actually. I'm going to be a fan today, Tom. What about you?
Oh, I've been looking forward to this for a while. Talking to Steve, about a month or so ago to get this all together, and then we both had a call with him, and a compelling, great career, which spanned over 21 years with the Presidential Protection Detail to the crime lab of the Secret Service to a number of appearances on TV. So we are very happy to have Steve Monteiro on Gold Shields today. Steve, how you doing, buddy?
I'm doing fine, guys. Thank you, and thank you very much for inviting me. When you first approached me, Tom, I had looked up your show, and I'd listened to a number of your guests, and you guys get some really, really awesome people on here, and I feel intimidated, and we haven't even started yet.
You feel intimidated. What do you think we are?
we feel like rookies.
I don't know if I can keep up.
No, you're great. Thank you. Yeah. We're honored to have you on, Stephen.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.
Tell us a little bit about you, where you grew up, how'd you made your way to the U.S. Secret Service?
That's an interesting story. So I'm originally from Boston, guys. And I do say the word cop, right? So
yeah.
But I'm from Boston, and I was a police officer in Concord, New Hampshire, the capital city, and I was there for about 8 years. I became a detective, and then there was a visit of Vice President George Bush. he was the VP at the time, and I was assigned to work with a local Secret Service agent doing intelligence work, just looking for any issues that would affect the visit. And everything went fine. And at the end of that, he said, "Have you ever thought about working in the Secret Service?" And I said, "Not really." He said, "Well, let me. I'm going to get back to you." So I kind of forgot about the conversation. You know how that goes. And he was a really nice guy. We exchanged business cards and all of that stuff. And he went on his way. I went on my way. And then a few weeks later, I get this letter in the mail, and it invites me down to the Boston office for an interview. And, I was surprised because you know how that goes. Oh, I'll get back to you. I'll stay in touch with you. And it goes in the circular file, right? You know how that goes. So I went down for the interview, and they seemed to like me. And, I did my own research on the organization, which I knew quite a bit about it anyway. But so it was almost a 2-year process at the time to get through. So I began it, and 2 years later, I was successful in being accepted. So that's how it happened, just by a meeting with another agent on an assignment.
So you had that 8 years of experience with the Concord, New Hampshire Police Department as a cop and detective, and you probably felt a lot more ready for the role of the Secret Service, didn't you? Because of that, that's a great training ground, police work.
Oh, absolutely, without a doubt. I think our most successful agents are the ones that have had prior police experience. Behind that, perhaps the military, because been exposed to law enforcement, and of course, as a police officer, you just experience just about everything. I often mention that, you know, in my career as a police officer in law enforcement for 30 years, I never once received a call because something good had happened. So you
Right.
get a lot of exposure to
Yeah.
a lot of things, and that prepared you really well for moving on to the federal system, which is a little bit different, I have to say. But it's a great ground, a great foundation to do that. So I enjoyed that.
Now, now, did you find the academy going through it? Not, I don't want to say easier because no academy at that level is easy. But were you a little bit better prepared to take on what you were going to face at the Secret Service Academy, being on the job already?
Oh, yeah, 100%. I remember going through and we were discussing preparing affidavits for search warrants, which I've done. Oh, so many of them. So to me, things like that was easy, and I would be like the mentor for some of these other guys that hadn't had the experience yet and how to prepare these affidavits. And it's interesting, and just in criminal procedures, interviewing, interrogation. I've had so much experience in that prior to going. That helped out quite a bit when I went over to that side. So, yeah, good foundation.
So you go through the U.S. Secret Service Training Academy. Is it a separate academy or is it down at FLETC?
Yeah, so it starts down in FLETC. So you did that particular basic criminal investigative academy. And when that was finished, you go up to Washington, D.C., and go through our own academy at Beltsville, which focuses on specifically Secret Service jurisdiction and, of course, the protection side of it, where FLETC was more of a general criminal investigative procedures, that type of thing. When we went to the Secret Service Academy, it kind of narrowed in on what we would, our jurisdiction, what we'd be specifically responsible for and doing. So you had both of them. So that was the completion of our training.
So I'm sorry, Tom.
No, no, no.
I was going to say for the.
The one thing I was going to ask, and I was looking forward to asking you, us as police officers have a tremendous responsibility and a knowledge of what could happen on the street, every day when you go out there. Now, as a Secret Service agent, how do you get in the mindset of not only do you have to prepare yourself mentally for that, now you have to prepare yourself for possibly throwing yourself in front of a bullet for someone? Like, how, I mean, that is a
Yeah.
tremendous mental mindset you have to be in the Secret Service, because that is a daily possibility.
Well, yes, it is. But just like my time in the police, and I think you guys can back me up on that. You really don't think about that. It comes with the territory. You accept that. And people ask me that all the time about the Secret Service. And I say to them, particularly other cops, it's no different than what you guys have done. Every time you go on a call, you hit a house, you hit an apartment, you execute a search warrant, you're putting your life out there as well. It may be for a different reason, but nonetheless, it's the same thing. Now, so we didn't think about it. It was just accepted and part of the job. Nobody really talked about it or delved on it. Oh boy, this could happen today. No, you just did your job. But the one thing that was different, guys, was the training for it. Because as a police officer, when you're dealing with an armed subject, you're taught to take cover, concealment, and all that. In the Secret Service, you're told to stand up, be broad, make yourself. So it was hard to retrain your brain to that type of scenario, because if there was gunfire, obviously the main thing is to evacuate the protectee, the president, get him out of there. But if you happen to be there, you don't want to take cover. You don't want to take concealment. You need to make yourself broad, open, stand up to take the shot. So that was different, the training. So you had to kind of reprogram your whole training scenario in your mind to that kind of concept. And then, of course, when you're working the criminal side of it, when you're doing search warrants, then you're back to the police type of training, concealment and cover. So, you work in both of these strategies in your head, and you had to keep switching back and forth. So that was unique. But as far as taking a bullet, that just comes with the territory, and you accept it.
You're right. It is not dissimilar to police work in
No,
that
not at
respect, I
all.
guess. So where was your first assignment? Right out of the gate, you graduate. Where did they send you? And tell us about that.
Well, it's interesting because I first got orders to go to New York City. So I was preparing for that, living over in Jersey and thinking about all that stuff. And then at the last minute, they changed it and said, no, we're going to assign you to the Boston field office. So that's where I started my career. And I went through all of the squads there: counterfeit squad, fraud, forgery squad, and I became a polygraph examiner for our agency, which was an incredible experience. I did that for a number of years and conducted polygraph examinations around the world, literally on cases as diverse as murders, crooked lawyers, frauds, threats against the president, counterfeiting, just a whole slew of federal crimes. And also, we were an asset to state and local police because, for example, in the state of Massachusetts, polygraphs are not allowed. So the locals would come to us, and I would administer the test on whatever case it was, a murder case or whatever. And that was fine. But that was a great experience. The tough part of that was when someone, when a case agent came to me or a police officer, and they wanted, and they said, "Hey, can you polygraph this guy?" It was something you had to do right away. You can't make the appointment a week in advance, because you know what's going to happen there. Everybody's going to get to this guy and tell him, "Hey, don't do it." So you had to go right there. So it wasn't uncommon for my phone to ring at 11 o'clock at night, and, "Hey, you got to go to Guatemala tomorrow. Case just broke. You got to get down there." And El Salvador, so Central America, overseas, every place in the United States, Detroit, LA, wherever the case broke. And so that was a little bit tough, because you never had a life that belonged to you, right? And you guys can experience that as it was a life that belonged to somebody else, not to you. So that was, but as far as the examination, I loved it. I loved getting in there, interrogating. I would be there for 8 hours if I had to. Not, it was just something that I really enjoyed doing. It became a personal thing for me. I know this guy's dirty. I'm going to get him. That's just it. And as you guys know, polygraph examinations are not normally admitted in courts, but we didn't care because we got the confession. So if the person confessed to the crime, who cares how that happened? And the results of the polygraph are never even discussed. He told us where the body is. He told us where the weapon is, and so that was great. So I really enjoyed that part of it. So I did that for several years and went through all the squads and did all the protection stuff as well. And then in 1993, I got assigned to DC and began my DC career. So, this was awesome.
I share your enthusiasm for the challenge of the interrogation process. And I
Oh.
think Tom does too. And there's nothing more satisfying than going into a room with somebody who despises you for what you stand for and is firmly committed in their mind not to tell you anything. But at the end of the day, at the end of their discussion with them, not only have they fully confessed and unburdened themselves, and it isn't unburdening for most people, they're hugging you.
Yeah. Oh,
We used
sure.
to
Yeah.
put them in the cell, they would fall asleep because now they're relieved. Of course, the reality hits them when they meet the defense attorney who says, "You did what?"
Yeah.
But but
That's a
it
whole
goes
nother
back.
story.
Yeah, goes back to the old saying of you have the right to remain silent, but not the ability.
Yeah.
But but I used to love that
Yeah.
challenge too.
Oh, yeah. My
I used to
favorite
get
one
excited.
was now I I'm not saying I did it, but if I did, what would I get?
Yeah,
And I'm like, okay, now how long is it going to be before this guy confesses? About 10
yeah,
minutes, I
yeah,
think, I'm not saying I did it, but if I did, what would I get?
and
yeah,
each
Yeah.
one and each one made you better.
Oh,
Each one just
sure.
made you better, and it made you
Absolutely. Well,
prepared
it's
for the
all about
next one.
reading people,
Right.
and of course, when I got sent to lots of interrogation schools and taught by some really good people. And it's all about reading people and learning what makes them tick, and how you can go in and what theme you need to use and what avenue you need to use, because basically you can get everybody to talk if you just approach them the right way. And you had to use different tactics on different people. But I had one case that was really, really kind of strange and funny at the same time. So it was a counterfeit case. It's a local case. One of our agents asked me to polygraph this guy. So he came in, he sat down, he gave me his identification. I'm going through all the pre-testing information, and I'm looking at this guy, and something doesn't seem right, but it doesn't click with me. So we're going through all that pre stuff, and we're getting ready to begin the examination, and all of a sudden, bam, it clicks. I said, I know you, and this is not you. He had his Massachusetts driver's license. I said, I arrested you 8 years ago for stealing 18 handguns from a store in Concord, New Hampshire. Do you remember me? And I mean, the blood just drained from the face.
yeah.
How unlucky can this guy be to run into, to run into me working in another state 8 years later for another agency in which he's involved in a counterfeit case, and he winds up coming in contact with me. That was incredible. I'm like, that guy's luck is not running today. So that was crazy. So
Those are great.
Oh,
We could probably do an entire show just
oh,
on
sure,
interrogations,
yeah.
and have more laughs with that than probably anything.
Oh,
Uh, but Steve, I want to ask you, for our audience, okay, a lot of perception for probably a good portion of our audience is the Secret Service protects the president. That's it. That's all they do. Take us through kind of the other jobs that they have and the other taskings that the Secret Service provides, and how your rotations work, because there is a rotation system in the Secret Service. So for our audience, let them know how the Secret Service actually works and what they do.
yeah. Well, you're right on your perception, Tom, because most people think of the Secret Service, the sunglasses, the earpieces, protecting the president. But the true fact is that most Secret Service agents don't do that directly. Um, you are selected to go on the president's detail, but the Secret Service was originally created in 1865 to suppress counterfeiting, which was rampant in our country at that time. It was estimated that about 1/3 of all the money in circulation was counterfeit, and that's because states created their own money individually. There were no safeguards, so it basically almost brought our country down to its knees financially. Uh, so something had to be done about it, and there was no investigative agency. This was all pre-FBI. As a matter of fact, my FBI brethren don't like it, but 8 Secret Service agents got transferred over to the Department of Justice, and they were the early creation of the FBI. So when I hit them up with that, they give me a hard time. So I said, "You guys came from us." But anyway, so it was all about counterfeiting, and that was the last official act that President Lincoln signed into law before he was assassinated. Was the creation of the Secret Service. to suppress counterfeiting. And then through the years, we took on more investigative responsibilities. Like, for example, the Teapot Dome scandal was something that we investigated. And our agents would often be borrowed from Treasury, because we were part of the Treasury Department, to go over to DOJ to work cases over there. So we were the first criminal investigative agency in the United States. So that was our background, to conduct criminal investigations, particularly financial investigations. And protection came later. It came when President McKinley was assassinated, and they had to look for a way to protect our nation's leaders. And that task fell to the Secret Service, and we, obviously been doing that since then. But our origins, our beginnings, are in financial crimes, and today we still have that. And we basically protect the payment system of the United States, and we bank frauds, forgeries, counterfeiting, credit card fraud, and of course now cyber is huge. I mean, cyber is probably our number one criminal threat that we face right now. So we're big involved in that type of activity as well. So regarding our rotations, yes, you kind of rotate throughout your career between investigations and protection. And a lot of it depends upon whether you want it. Now, today I understand that if you choose to stay in the investigative avenue, you can do that. But for me, I wanted to participate in that protection activity. So when I left Boston, after about 8 years, I went to Washington, D.C., and I was in our intelligence division. And I was responsible for intelligence activities in sub-Saharan Africa and parts of South America. And so I did that for a couple of years, and then eventually I got transferred over at my request. And I was selected to go over to the president's detail at the White House, which was an incredible experience. So you do rotate back and forth, which is great because it gives you kind of a break from different things and different experiences. And I like the protection side of it because you really, God, I tallied it up one time, guys, and I think I've been to like 60 countries. So the experiences of traveling, of meeting other people, of experiencing other cultures. I remember one time when I was in the intelligence division, I got sent to Saudi Arabia in advance of a visit by President Bush, which was a prelude to that first Gulf War. And I was sitting I had a one-on-one meeting with one of the crown princes of Saudi Arabia, who was in charge of intelligence for his country. And I'm sitting there thinking, I'm in a one-on-one meeting with the crown prince of Saudi Arabia, in one of the most contentious areas in the world in terms of terrorist threats and everything else. I said, this is incredible. It's a Boston guy sitting here, local cop, and now I'm sitting here with the Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. So those types of experiences were just amazing. And the opportunities to work with so many different people in the embassies was just incredible. So I really did enjoy that.
A front row seat to some of the most amazing historical events ever.
Yeah, that's interesting you say that because there was another Secret Service agent that he had written a book. This was a number of years ago, and they asked him what it's like, and he said, "Well, being a Secret Service agent is like standing next to history." And I always kind of remembered that because it was cool, but it was awesome, but it was true because you're there to some of the most significant events in our country's history. And you may be on the peripheral of it, but you're there and you're part of it. So I thought that was kind of a cool way to describe it. So I always held on to that thought.
Wow. So you had your opportunity to do protective detail, and it sounds like it was during the Bush administration.
Clinton.
Oh, Clinton. Okay.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
So at some point you left there. You transferred out of there, or they rotated you out of there and you went to a different assignment in the Secret Service. What was that all about?
Yeah, when I left the President's detail, I became an instructor at our training academy. And then I also, after that, I did that for a few years, and I was transferred to our Office of Congressional Affairs, and I became a congressional fellow with the 106th Congress. So I was assigned to work for a senator and a congressman. So I worked on the Senate side and the House. I did appropriations work, and that was an incredible experience to see how our government works and sometimes doesn't work from being up on the Hill. just opened up my eyes to a whole way of understanding things. So that was a really unique experience. So I did DC appropriations. I worked on a Treasury postal subcommittee, and I was responsible. I had helped to write some legislation and some report language that went into the record. So that was a great experience. And then after that, I got assigned to the Forensic Services Division and eventually became the agent in charge, which was also a great experience.
The more the public learns about the TV show CSI and things like that are obviously broadly exaggerated in many ways for dramatic effect on television and the movies, but it is fascinating work, forensic work, and I can only imagine some of the stuff that comes through the Secret Service. And I'm just thinking in terms of threats to the president and vice president and their families and stuff. But tell us about some of the stuff you worked on there that you can talk about.
Sure.
Um,
Sure. But you're right, Dan. I mean, forensics is really incredible because it's the technology has exploded over the years in terms of what we can do. And we had a unique a lab, crime lab, because we specialized in documents, and that was really unique. We had the largest ink library in the entire world, over 7,000 samples of ink, and we were very good at that. And we would get cases from basically not only domestically, the FBI would send their cases over to us, but state and local police, and then international as well. So we did a lot of work internationally as well. And it was really unique because we could tell, where a piece of paper came from, the tree that that it came from, how long that ink had been on the paper, where the ink was manufactured, who made it, how long it's been in existence, and so you're able to really delve down into some really good details that helped the investigators solve their cases. When someone says, "Oh, I wrote this. This is my signature, and I wrote it in 2005 on a contract," for example. And then you would do an ink analysis and say, "Hey, that ink wasn't even invented." And so, that's BS. So all those types of things. So it was a great experience. And when I got there to learn all of the different things we've done, so voice analysis and just a whole bunch of other forensic stuff, it really was an eye opener. And I was really happy to be involved in that. And we just worked some incredible cases. As a matter of fact, there was we had a system called FISH, the Forensic Information System for Handwriting, and we got a case from you guys where there was a threat to bomb the subways, and of course, when that happens, it's a tough decision to make. Do you start closing subways down? What do you do? Is the threat real? Is it just BS? And so there was a lot of decisions to be made there because shutting down a subway or a series of subways is a big deal. It affects a lot of people, so you just can't do it willy-nilly. So the Joint Terrorism Task Force in New York was working that case, and one of the Secret Service agents that was on that said, "Hey, we got this." It was a letter that was sent in making this threat. So one of the agents said, "We got this system in the Secret Service called FISH. How about if I send them the letter and see what they can do with it?" And so that letter was sent to our laboratory, and within 1 hour, and that's God's honest truth, within 1 hour, we told them who wrote the letter, and they found out where the guy was. And it was somebody that was in prison, and he managed to get this letter out, making this bomb threat. And they were able to, go and visit this guy and squash this, which was a really good thing because they were really in a quandary because, obviously we had attacks there. We had the first World Trade Center attack and everything else. So I didn't know. I mean, these things, you have to take all of these threats seriously. So the JTTF was really happy that they were able to, squash this case pretty quickly and find out who did this. So that's just an example of some of the capabilities that we had.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
And bad guys still think they can get away with stuff.
Yeah, it's incredible. So we did voice analysis too when someone would call and make a threat, and we'd be able to track them down doing voice analysis. So it was a really good experience. And also we were the conduit. Our division was the conduit to the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children, NCMEC, and that was some really incredible work. So we supported them. And did some terrific work for them. And I actually had some of my people that were assigned over to that to that organization which is just amazing. It's a great resource for state and local police, and so we're happy to support them in their work they do to protect our children against sex crimes and sex trafficking. So we had our hands in a lot of different pies here.
Wow. Wow. Um, Now, Tom and I both served in the JTTF in New York. Tom much longer than I. I can say honestly, I don't remember that case from my time when I was there, but I would not have necessarily known about it anyway. That's the nature of the JTTF. But to anybody who has never been to New York City and traveled the subway, a threat to the subway system is a threat to millions of lives. Not a couple thousand, millions. Millions would be impacted, but thousands and thousands could be killed easily
Sure.
with a successful attack on a given subway train at the right station at the right time. It is a significant, significant threat. And one of the things I've maintained ever since my career ended in law enforcement, and people asked about certain things, and one of the things I've assured them is that you can rest reasonably confident as an American that we have an apparatus in place of people around the world working 24/7 with the highest degree of commitment and dedication and the greatest technology the world has ever seen to protect you. Just know that.
Yeah.
And it gets better every day.
Sure.
So you were part of that apparatus, and that's it. People don't know, have no idea what's behind. And Tom made a good statement. You think you're still going to get away with something, huh? Good
Yeah.
luck, because honestly, there are 8 ways to Sunday to catch somebody,
Oh,
and when
sure.
you get a committed investigator or investigative team or agency, you're done.
Yeah.
Literally, you're done.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of when.
Yeah, and that's the whole key. Is the downside to that is, unfortunately, we can't put all those resources on every case, right? And that's the down. But you're right, though. If we zero in on you, good luck, because we will find you. And you guys do some terrific work up there, and yeah, so we were just proud to be part of it and help out and work with our state and local partners. So as I mentioned, working in FSD, Forensic Services Division, we touched on so many different cases throughout the country and supporting them with forensic work, whether it's fingerprints or a myriad of other types of forensic examinations. And we were just happy to do so, and glad that we were able to bring a lot of these cases, help them to solve these cases. So we're very proud of that work,
Yep.
for sure.
So comes a time you did 21 years with the Secret Service, and thank you for your service. Most of it will never be able to be told because of the secretive nature of what you guys do. But thank you for that service. Tom and I are well aware, as are many who listen to this show, of the exact nature of the dedication. And to anybody who doesn't know what holes and walls are, talk about standing on your feet in a hotel for 12 hours at a shift, being highly vigilant the whole time because you have a protectee 2 doors down who is, a world decision maker. That's pressure, ladies and gentlemen. That is, this is a tough job. And so our hats go off to the men and women who do that work every day.
Thank you, and the same to you guys working doing the stuff that you do. So
Well, right now we're talking to you. This is easy. This is fun.
This is easy now.
Yeah.
So comes a time you retire from the Secret Service between your 8 years in Concord and your 21 years in the Secret Service. You want to try something different, and you went into a contracting role. Tell us a little bit about that, and let's get into this case because I can't wait to hear about it.
Sure, sure. So it was kind of bizarre how all that happened. So when I finished my time in the Secret Service, I was looking for other opportunities, and I had sent out a bunch of resumes and had gone on some interviews and hadn't quite settled on anything. And then one day I get a call from a company called Booz Allen Hamilton, which is a huge government consulting firm, and they're very good. My years with them were just so, I was just blessed to be part of that company because they had some really, really sharp people, and they do some great work in supporting government. So anyway, I get a call from them to come in for an interview. So I go down there, and they tell me that they looked at my resume, and I couldn't even remember if I even sent it to them. So I wasn't even sure how they got it, but they managed to get their hands on it. And they said, "We're looking for someone with your skill set." And I said, "Well, that's good. That's a good way to start this off." And so we began to have this discussion, and they couldn't tell me. The disconcerting thing was they couldn't tell me exactly what they wanted me to do. So that was a little bit, strange. So they said, "Well, we think you'd be the right fit, right person for the job, but we really can't tell you what it's all about. And so I went home after this, and I talked to my wife, and I said, well, Booz Allen's a great company, and if they can't tell me right now, then I'm guessing it probably is because it's a sensitive program, classified program, so they can't discuss it. They may not even be aware of it. But if I don't like it, if it's something I don't think I can do, I'll move on. So she said, oh, yeah, I concur with that. Go ahead and give it a shot, see what how it works out for you. So I took the job on a leap of faith, right? So I would tell your listeners now, never take a job on a leap of faith because it could be a disaster for you. So I took this job on a leap of faith, and I reported to the science and technology director, and specifically the research and development division. That's where Booz Allen sent me. So I was even more confused because I'm not a tech guy. I'm not a science guy. And, research and development, what skills could I have that they could possibly use in research and development? So I was, quite amazed at that. So I sat there for a couple of weeks and, getting passwords and all that orientation stuff. So, and I was just like, wow, no one's telling me anything here. I said, this division is like, run silent, run deep. What is anybody going to tell me anything? So after a couple of weeks, I got a call to go in and see the deputy director of the division, and he was a submariner in the Navy, and I was a cryptologist. So we had some conversations about our time in the military. And then I saw him. He bent down to this government safe, and he spun the dial, and he opened it up and pulled out this folder, and he gave it to me and said, go back to your desk and read this, and this will tell you what we want you to do. That was the extent of my briefing. And that was even more strange. So I took this document, I just took this folder, went back to my desk, and I opened it up and I started to read. And with each page I turned, I got a chill, like up my spine. It was like, what? And I finished reading the document. I went through the whole thing, and finally I closed it and I said, they want me to do what? And what it was my assignment was to find a missing Iraqi bioweapon scientist who had vital information that we needed. That was the assignment. So to say that I was a little bit overwhelmed and shocked and surprised is an understatement, because I'm thinking, how am I going to begin this? And he could be dead. He could be in Syria. We just had no idea where this guy was. And at that time, I was working this alone. Eventually, I got a couple of other guys on the team, which I'll talk about because there were a couple of characters. But that was the assignment, was to find this missing Iraqi bioweapon scientist somewhere in the Mideast. So after I had learned this, I got home and I was talking to my wife, and she said to me, we're so glad to have you, working normal hours the last 2 weeks and being home every night and all that. It's great. So I said, well, you might want to hold that thought because I just found out what they want me to do. So that was the assignment. That's how it happened.
It conjures up images in my mind of that old TV show. They give you a tape recording. Was it Mission Impossible?
Mission Impossible, yeah.
Yeah. At the end of this, it'll self-destruct.
That's right. Yeah.
You're expecting the file to go on fire after you're done reading it. It's just so super secretive. Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you got to think for a second. You're on a movie set, for a brief moment, because that's what happens in a movie.
Yeah.
Not in real life.
Sure. Well, what was even more crazy was where I was assigned. I'm like, this is an assignment for other agencies, the 3-letter ones, the one that begins with a C that I won't say. I said, those are the guys that do this type of stuff. How did that wind up here and with me as a contractor? I didn't learn that until, months later. So at the beginning, I was totally blind as to how that happened. Because it was a classified program, and you guys know how classified programs work. They only tell you what you need to know to do your particular piece of the job. So that way, if something happened, you can't give up the whole enchilada. So that's how it worked. So I was kind of kept in the dark for OPSEC reasons. And my job was to find this guy and bring him in. And that's what it was. And it wasn't until much later that I was sort of read in on other things and really learned a lot about the background and the reason why he was so important. That came much later. But that was how it happened. You know.
So take us. All right, what do you do? Where do you start from there?
Yeah. Well, the first thing I did was I went to my boss, Dr. Maureen McCarthy, who was in charge of the division. She was just a dynamo of a person, just a go-getter, and just someone who was great to work for. So, I said to her, I'm doing this alone. I said, this is kind of something that I might need some assistance. So, she got that. And so I went to see her one day in the office, and she gave me a business card. She said, call this guy. He can help you. He can be part of the team. So I called it. It was an HSI agent named Kevin Kelly. And he had been in Iraq before, so it was important that I connect with him. So he became my second team member. So it was him and I. And then after a few weeks, he suggested that we bring a third team member on, and it wound up being Jim Elseth, who was a lieutenant colonel in the Marines at the time, and he was assigned to the Treasury Department, and he was part of an investigative team that was conducting fraud investigations in Iraq. So that became the three amigos, I guess you could say. We became the three team members. And I specifically remember the date. It was January 12th. So on January 12th, 2006, my team and I set out to find this missing Arab person who was important to someone. 2.5 years later, we were successful. So the Gray Bird of Baghdad is the story of those 2.5 years.
That's amazing. I mean, you were now in your time with the 60 countries that you had mentioned before, was Iraq one of them, or was that your first time there?
No, it was my first time in Iraq, but I had been to other countries in the Middle East, obviously Israel. I've been to Saudi Arabia a number of times. And so other countries, Kuwait and so forth. So, but it was my first time in Iraq. But I had some experience in the Middle East, and I think that was part of the reason why I was sort of selected through Booz Allen to kind of come on board with this. And so we began, like you begin other investigations. You do a lot of gumshoe work, right? You start off by learning a lot, as much as you can about the subject that you're trying to find, his contacts, what made him tick, what was his situation, which when I started to look into that and peel back the onion on who this guy was, I was just blown away at what had happened to him and what this person, this scientist, had gone through, which was quite remarkable in and of itself. And that made it even more challenging because I wasn't sure this guy would even trust us if we were even able to find him. And what had happened was when we invaded Iraq in June of 2003, this particular scientist worked in the Saddam Hussein regime, bioweapon scientist, was arrested by coalition forces. And he was thrown in prison and he was tortured. And he was kept in prison for 2.5 years. And when he was finally released, he was released into the worst possible environment for these scientists because the jihadis and the insurgents, they realized that it would be very difficult to challenge the U.S. government militarily. So they enacted this other campaign, and it was pretty effective. And their campaign was to eliminate all of the scientists and intelligista in the country and academics and kill them or kidnap them as a way to prevent the new Iraq government from being successfully stood up, because they believed that the new Iraq government was going to be a puppet of the U.S. and they didn't want it to be successful. So one way to prevent that was to wipe out the brain power of that country. So they literally engaged in a campaign and assassinated, kidnapped hundreds of academics and scientists. So when he was released in prison, he had this target on his back. And that caused him to go into hiding and adopt disguises and try to get out of the country. And that became more challenging for our team to try to find him because he was a man who did not want to be found.
Wow. These are little sub stories that go on in places where we get the story every night about the political slant from depending upon which network you're
Sure.
watching, whether the war is righteous, the war is not righteous, the war is costing too much money, we lost some more lives. The president said this, the Joint Chiefs Staff said that. We get those stories, but these are the sub stories going on underneath all that noise that are real human lives, right? This guy had a family, I assume.
Yes, yes. Married with children.
Hmm.
Married with children.
Now he's on the run for his life, and everybody is a potential enemy. Everybody he knows even could be looking. He probably had a price on his head, I'm sure. Um, I can't imagine what it's like to be that guy. And then looking for somebody who is that committed to not being found. Um, tell us some of the stuff, tell us some that happened along the way, some of the milestones of the investigation, because I'm still dumbfounded as to how to where to start,
Yeah,
really, you know?
sure. Well, so the environment in which we had to look for him was 2006 is when it started for me, and of course, 2006 was one of the worst years of the war in Iraq. The when we went there, we pretty much defeated Saddam's forces and his Republican Guard pretty quickly. They broke and ran. But what we hadn't prepared for was the insurgency, was the jihadis, in which thousands of foreign fighters from all over, from Lebanon, from Syria, from Iran, all flooded into Iraq to fight the coalition forces. So that kind of took us by surprise. So that was so think about this. You've got military forces from the outside. So you've got a war going on. You've got an insurgency on the inside. And so you think about, what Iraqis had to go through. And and that was one of the reasons why I wanted to write this book, was not because of what we did, but because of what this person went through. I wanted the reader to understand the perspective from the other side. There's been a lot of books written about the Iraq War from our military guys, which I commend them up and down. I'm a veteran myself, so I they were asked to do incredible things, and they did incredible things. So my hat goes off to them. But what we don't often talk about is the innocent victims of war. What happens to the people who have to suffer through this? Nobody talks about them. We talk about our soldiers, and rightfully so. But when I got to know this person, who, in my estimation, was my enemy, right? We were at a war with Iraq. I mean, my brothers and sisters were coming home in flag draped coffins. So he was my enemy, and I thought of him as that. And part of that was because of my time at Ground Zero. I was at Ground Zero for a couple of weeks on the recovery. Of course, we had building number 7, and that went down. And you guys know this better than I do. That was a horrible, horrible situation. And standing on the pile, standing on the graves of 3,000 people will affect you in more ways than you'd ever want to know. So I wasn't a happy camper. I mean, you guys had taken a big beating, and how many people you lost, and FDNY lost all their people, and it was horrible. When I first went out on that site, it was 15 acres of complete devastation. It was nothing like I've seen. You talk about a movie scene. This was 10 times worse than that. And so I had my own demons. I was like not happy camper with anybody from the Middle East. Iranians, Saudis, whatever. I'm just tired of it. They attacked us, and we suffered tremendously because of that. So I wasn't a happy camper. Of course, now I have to find one and get him to cooperate. So I had my own issues with that. But mission first, right? You have a mission, you have an assignment, so you put you tap down your own feelings and you go forth. But by all intents and purposes, he was my enemy. So so we had to look for him in this horrible environment, and so my big concern was every single day these guys were getting killed, and I was getting reports through the State Department about people being assassinated, and I'd run over to the State Department to see who it was, because we couldn't talk about this stuff on the phone, and I would hope and pray it wasn't our guy, which was kind of weird, because if it wasn't our guy, that meant it was somebody else. So it was kind of bizarre way of thinking about things. But so that was my big concern. And then, of course, my other concern was after what he had been through and being incarcerated, put in prison for 2.5 years for having done nothing, by the way. He was never charged with any crime, and having been treated the way he was, even if we were fortunate enough to find him, which was a needle in a haystack to begin with, would he even want to talk with us? So I'm like, we can go through all this and he can say, why would I ever trust you? Look what you did to me. Because by all intents and purposes, he welcomed the, Saddam being defeated. And because, I mean, he was a brutal dictator, that's for sure. So he was pro-American, but he got caught up in these events, not of his own doing. And so I wasn't sure he would even trust us if we even found him. So that was a big concern of mine. So, but while that was going on, what made the case even more, I guess you could say, challenging, was that there were parts of our own government that didn't want us to succeed. And I just couldn't put my finger on it at the beginning. And it didn't kind of fit in till months later. But every time that we would try to, make a step forward, we'd get pulled back. So I had to work through the Homeland Security Council, which was a council that was created after 9/11 by President Bush to deal with Homeland Security issues, because we had created the Department of Homeland Security. So that was my go-to. So I had to go to the White House on many occasions for many meetings, trying to get the green light to go get this guy and find out this vital information. And I can tell you, we were just thwarted at every turn. And I just couldn't understand why they would do it. And in DC, one agency can't come out and refuse to cooperate with another one. That's not done because it looks really bad. But if they don't want to help you, they'll do what we call a slow roll to you. And you guys know that term. And they did it with incredible skills. So for example, we'd be at Homeland Security, and these scientists are being killed, and we need to get this guy, and blah blah blah. And I'd make my compelling case, and they would say, well, so and so is going to be replaced on the council, so we need his replacement to get up to speed. So we need to give him 2 or 3 weeks to get a good handle on this. And it just kept going on and on and on. And I was just getting so frustrated and angry. And I'd bring that back home to my poor wife, and let her be the brunt of all this. And just frustrated at why this was happening. Eventually I learned why it was happening. And I can talk about that a little bit later, but that just added to the frustration about doing it. But I don't know how you guys are, but for me, the more somebody tells me no, the more it's like, no, that's, I'm doing this, so we just kept at it. And my boss was great. And Jim and Kevin, Jim was a lieutenant colonel from Marine Corps. He was awesome, great. And we just had this camaraderie that started from day one. So that was kind of interesting when I was bringing them onto the team. I gave them a briefing. I said, here's the deal. So we're looking for this scientist. We don't know where he is. We have no backup. We have no money. We have no leads. And so I just named all of these things that were not going our way, and so at the end I said, so are you guys still interested? And all I got was, hell yeah, we're interested. That even makes it better, hell yeah. When they said that, I'm like, I get these guys and they're going to have my back. And they did. And so we became, really tight. But we still had to fight the bureaucracy. And that just took a lot of time and patience. And it went on for quite a while. So that was another challenge. But right, why should it go well, right?
Yeah.
Why make it easy?
Yeah, that's it.
Easy's not fun.
No, that's right. Yeah. So
it wouldn't be a book if it was.
That's right. If it didn't have all
we
these,
looked up his.
There you go.
Yeah, his driver's license. Went to his house. He was there.
Yeah.
He got on a plane. He willingly cooperated. He was
Yeah.
a great guy. We still have lunch.
Yeah,
No, it's not a story if it's that.
That's
right.
right. That's right. Yeah.
So when you were there, Steve, were you attached, the three of you, were you attached to a military team, or were you guys completely on your own?
No, we were on our own, but of course Jim was very valuable to us because he was a lieutenant colonel in the Marines, so we needed that liaison because we were working off of military bases, and it was military operation here. So we kind of had to work with them. But, we had asked for help along the way many times. And we even went to our brothers over in the CIA to say, hey, this is what you guys do, how can you help us out? And they said, hey, we'd love to, but we're facing an insurgency that we never expected, and we're up to our necks in our own mud. So you guys are just going to have to figure this out on your own. So that was the way it went. So we worked off of a military base. I had a CAT card and all of that and access and everything, but we weren't assigned to any military unit. We were the unit. We were the guys that had to execute this. So that's the way it went throughout the entire operation.
How long were you on the ground in Iraq?
Oh, well, I was there several times, each time a few weeks at a time, come back, go back a few weeks, come back, go back a few weeks. So it was an in and out thing while we were trying to make contact, set things up, and then come back and go to the Homeland Security Council with hat in hand again, trying to convince them that we need to do this. So that's how it went. It was an in and out, back and forth type of thing. And, we truly did not know where the guy was. And so we had to just keep, doing detective work and reaching out to people that knew him, that had contact with him. And at one point, he actually tried to leave Iraq when he was being hunted, and he tried to get out through Syria. So him and his wife, Iman, who was an incredible woman. I can only imagine, what she had to go through. And the regret I have in the book is that I didn't really talk about Iman that much because she couldn't speak English. So it was a little difficult communicating with her. But what an incredible person she was in terms of what she had to go through. Her husband was arrested. She didn't know where he was for 7 months. He went to work one day and disappeared. And she didn't know where he was for 7 months. Had no idea what happened to him, whether he was killed, whether he was taken prisoner, none. So she had to deal with all of that. And then when she found out he was in prison, he came out and he went on the run. So she had to deal with that. She had a family to bring up during this war, and she did it by herself. So what an incredibly strong woman. But anyway, Thamer and Iman made an attempt to try to get out of the country through Syria. And so they left for about 11 months. So he went off the radar screen at that particular point in time for me. And they were unsuccessful because they just couldn't convince anybody through any of the embassies they went to give him a hand because the refugee crisis was out of control at that time. So he wound up having to come back to Iraq, and that's when I eventually caught up with him.
What a story. Thankfully you wrote a book about it because, it's one of those things, you hear these stories every once in a while from people like you or who've gone overseas during the war and gone through whatever they were, whatever the case might be. But to document it and have it out there for everyone so everyone can hear or see it and read it is incredible. I mean, I spent some time in Afghanistan doing a case, and it's different. It's
Yeah.
not, it's not like I said in a couple other shows. It's not the Bronx. It's not Boston. It's a totally different
Yeah.
mindset, and you get caught up in it because you're so mission focused. Like
Sure.
you were saying before, they're saying no, no, screw you. We're getting them. We're
Yeah.
finding them, no matter what it takes. And you work around the hurdles and the people get in your way, and you come out successful when you have that determination, which you did. So hats off to you, brother.
Yeah, it was, well, thank you, but it was a team effort, obviously, and I had, and my two guys were just awesome, and it was one of these deals where you had to kind of, figure out things as you went along. Nothing was laid out for you. Nobody was, here's how you do it and here's how it's done, and every time we turn around, it was just something, another. I needed to get a visa for this guy, obviously, when we did find him, right, to bring him into the country, because no matter what the situation is, I still needed a visa. So I went through the embassy in Iraq to try to do it. And I didn't hear back from those guys, and I was getting worried. I said, man, what's going on with this? And so finally I had a meeting with them, and they said, sorry, no visa. I said, are you kidding me? He's coming to the United States at the behest of Department of Homeland Security. This is a governmental operation. What do you mean no visa? I can't tell you. The consular officer on the ground has the final say, and no visa. And I was like, you've got to be kidding me. So, so I'm thinking, that's just going the way of everything else, so we never got a visa, and I never found out the reason why. They never told me, but there was no appeal to that. And apparently I heard that even the Secretary of State can't appeal an on the ground consular office who says no go. So we were stuck, and we had to come up with a different way to get him legally out of the country and get him to the United States. And we used a different method. But again, it was one of those things you're on the fly, right? So you have to come up with different ways and different methods to use to accomplish the mission. But that was one of the headaches. That just kind of proceeded, and eventually over time and just using again some just plain old gumshoe investigative detective work, we managed to track down someone who had contact with him, and it was through that arena that we were able to first make a connection with Thamar, and I was hoping that he wouldn't get worried, because he didn't know. I mean, because not only were the jihadis looking to kill scientists, but we had learned that a new Iraqi government had a warrant for his arrest. Probably because of his association with the previous regime. I mean, there was a lot of revenge stuff going on there. It was pretty bad because under Saddam, the Sunnis had the power. And when he was kicked out, then the Shias, they took over. So they wanted revenge. I mean, they were treated badly for the 27 years that Saddam was in power. So there was a lot of revenge stuff going on, because Iraqis are different. They don't have a sense of national identity. They identify with their tribe, with their sect. So during the war, if you get stopped by the wrong group, by the wrong sect, they could kill you right on the spot. And they would kill people right then and there because there was a lot of that going on. And another thing that they would do is they would stop, the jihadis and the insurgents would stop Iraqis, and they would grab their phone. And if you had a telephone number that was associated with the Americans, right on the spot. So that was the environment that this guy had to go through. So it made it a little bit more challenging to get him to trust us and want to do that. So when I first made contact with him, I was hoping that we would start that trust factor, and I had to build it up over time. It just didn't come right away because he didn't know. Are they just trying to trick me? Because what had happened, and I'm digressing a little bit, but when he was in prison, he was actually visited by Americans because he had this certain skill set that we really, information and knowledge that we wanted to avail ourselves of. And he was promised that he would be relocated to the U.S. and all this other stuff, and that never happened. He was just forgotten about. They just left him, and then he was released into this horrible environment. So his trust factor, he didn't know whether we were going to turn him into the new Iraqi government or do something ourselves. Because it was interesting that when I was talking with Kevin one day, Kevin Kelly, he mentioned that in one of the earlier HSC meetings, there was a
That's Thamar right now.
Yeah.
He's calling us.
I'm sorry, guys. There was a
All
meeting
right.
at the HSC Council, and they were talking about Thamar and what to do with him, and the fact that he was a proliferation risk. Right? If the bad guys caught him, they could use his skill set against us.
Absolutely.
So one of the HSC members said, "Well, why don't we just take him out?" And that was just shocking that the Homeland Security Council would say that. I mean, this is not the place for those types of discussions to occur. And, of course, the room fell silent, and I think the person regretted what he said, but that was kind of, his mindset, what he was thinking of. Why are we messing around with Thamar? Just take him out. And so I can only imagine what Thamar was thinking. Can I ever trust these guys again? Could they be taking me into a trap? So my time, I had to build up this trust with him over time to get him to, and I was hoping he wouldn't hang up on me, and hoping he wouldn't that when I would try to reach back with him and call him, that he would still stay connected. So sometimes when I would try to reach him while we were waiting for the green light to do this, there would be long delays, and I'm thinking he's dead. He's been taken out, or he's just decided not to cooperate, and he's in the wind again. So that was just another factor. And he was very careful. He never let on where he was or anything like that. So, and our conversations were very brief, obviously. So that was just a trust factor that had to be built up over time. And so it's just another issue to deal with.
So he is a microbiologist. He could be, as you just mentioned, a tremendous asset to jihadists or any force that's anti-American with regards to biological attacks. Biological attacks are something that I hope and pray we never really see on a grand scale in this country, because they're far more nasty than a bomb dropping, far more long-lasting and wide-reaching, and more scary than you can imagine. And this guy, an expert whose expertise could have been used to that. So he's got everybody chasing him,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
he has no idea what's going to happen when he's caught, whether he's going to be a slave to making bombs that are going to kill millions of innocent people, or he's going to be immediately killed and his family killed on the spot,
Yep. Yep.
or the unthinkably good,
Yep.
which is that somehow I get out of this, right?
Sure. That was on his mind, and of course he had a family to worry about. So, so what the jihadis were doing with, if you had a skill set that they could use, like you were involved in the military operations, or you had conventional weapon skills, or bio or chem or anything, you had some value to them. So they'd kidnap you, force you to work, and the rest of them, they would kill you. So that went on, and there were literally hundreds of them. And an exact tally is hard to keep, because it was hard to get those types of statistics during the war. But literally hundreds of academics were assassinated. And there was one leading Iraqi scientist who was quoted in the newspaper saying, "There's an effort to kill all of us." That was his quote, and it was true. So yeah, he was very worried about what would happen in his future, who to trust, who not to trust. And I actually didn't envy his choices. They were hard to make, because now you're also cooperating with the foreign government, right? Just add that element onto the issue. Even though we were working with the Iraqi government, there's still that aspect of it that he had to deal with. So when we eventually made contact, we eventually started building up the trust, and then we, after persistence, we eventually got the okay to go to Iraq, but it wasn't before my boss, Maureen McCarthy, dropped the bomb, and that's what I call it, the bomb, because we were getting such pushback. So we were at S&T headquarters on Vermont Avenue in D.C., and she said, "We're going to go to DHS headquarters." I said, "Okay, when are we going to leave?" "We're going to leave in about an hour. We're going to go see somebody." So we went up to DHS headquarters, myself and Dr. McCarthy, and we went into the skiff. And we were sitting in the skiff, and it was about this case. I knew what it was about. And in walks Secretary Michael Chertoff and his Deputy Secretary Jackson, just the two of them. We went to, one of President Bush's cabinet members. and I was like mildly surprised, because we were jumping over a whole bunch of people at that point. So she was kind of pissing off a whole bunch of people making that leap. But it was really interesting, because Chertoff was just so into what we were trying to do, and so he was the second Homeland Security Secretary, and I can say he really, really cared, and he had the attitude that, my job is to protect the homeland, but I don't care how far of a net I have to throw to do that. I'm going to do it, and I don't give a rat's, whose jurisdiction whose toes I'm stepping on. And I just love that, and that was his attitude. He said, I'm not going to worry until a problem rolls up on a New Jersey beach before I realize I have a problem. If we have to go overseas, we have to do whatever we have to do to protect the homeland. We're going to do it, and I love that. So. We had given him the briefing, and it's like, being the secretary, it's like, "Okay, you guys got 5 minutes, go. Tell me what I need to know, what decision I need to make." Boom, the clock is running. So we did the best we could, and we hoped at the end of this that we had convinced him that this was, we needed his support. So he listened to the briefing. He finished, and he got up. And he's a real tall guy. So he got up, and I stood up, and he shook my hand and said, "Okay, go get him." And I was just like, "Man, that's great, man,
Wow.
awesome." So we left there, and we were kind of to say that we were on cloud nine is putting it mildly. So I'm like, man, boom. So it was shortly after that we got the green light, and go find Thalmer, get him, bring him in, and let's get the information that he has that we need. So that's what happened.
Again, it's a script. It's a movie script.
It is, without a doubt. Who do you want to play you in the movie, Steve?
Well, it's funny. It's funny you guys mentioned that, but I did get a couple of calls from some Hollywood producers, actually. So I had a couple of Zoom calls with them. Yeah. So we had some Zoom calls, and so who knows? But anyway, it's funny you mentioned that. But so that's what happened, and so we were eventually given the green light. So the three of us headed to Iraq to find Dahmer.
Well, I would make myself available to be an extra in the movie, or even to have a minor role, just so you know, because I've been acting like a podcast host for a few months now, and some people believe it. That's an incredible story.
You guys would be stars in a heartbeat. You kidding me? You'd be naturals, right?
I don't know about that, but anyway, what a story. I mean, obviously, so much more to it. The Gray Bird of Baghdad is the book, an ex-Secret Service agent's desperate mission to save an Iraqi scientist by Stephen Philip Monteiro. We could talk to you for hours, and there's a lot more in the book that you weren't able to bring up right now. And I'm just started it. I can't wait to tear through it. And now that I have this relationship with you, and I've met you in person via this, I'll be hearing it in your voice as I read the book. So I'm looking forward to it. And we can't thank you enough.
Sure.
I mean, I'll let Tom talk in a second, but we really appreciate you coming on the show, sharing your story. First of all, living through it and putting up with the frustrations of dealing with the bureaucracies and the politics and all the nonsense, staying laser-like mission focused. I'm sure there's at least one Iraqi microbiologist who's really happy you did.
Yeah.
I mean, him and his family. But the difference you may have made, the lives you may have saved by your persistence can't be counted. We won't know them, and that's a good thing, right?
That's a good thing, and I credit. There's a lot of other people. I was just one person involved in it. There were many others, and as you said in the beginning of the show, Dan, the American people don't know what goes on behind the scenes to protect them every day from people like yourselves and local, state police, federal, the guys on the border. I mean, all the things that they're doing every single day, working hard, putting their lives on the line to do it. And it's been frustrating over the last few years to see how we've been aligned or misaligned to this anti-police narrative and everything else. So, I think it's shows like yours that bring to light some of these stories, and they're really great because people need to hear the other side. They need to hear what's going on and how people are dedicated to committing them, and not some of this anti-police ridiculous narrative that's been spun up that is totally false. And has soured people, and that's unfortunate. But it's shows like yours that are going to turn the tide on that. I'm confident. So keep up that good work and keep up the message, and I think it's so important.
Well, thank you, Steve. And you know what? You're two very prominent examples of why we did this show. One was to highlight the great work that no one knows about, like you just mentioned. That was the main focus of this show. Because of the anti-police sentiment out there, we wanted to prove to people that these things happen on a daily basis by the bravest men and women out there. And the other thing is, one of our phrases on the show is to give people a backstage pass to cases they don't know about. And you just gave the ultimate backstage pass to a story and a case that majority of people don't know about, and now they will through hopefully listening to this show and watching this show and your book. And it was, I mean, I'm proud, and Dan would say the same thing, to have you on the show, to hear your story. And we're not just saying that, we're not like that, but legitimately proud to know you, to know what you went through and your team, and you could tell you're a humble man because you said the team 5 or 6 times, which we have all the respect for, when people do that. And it's a hell of a story when you have Hollywood producers knocking on your door. It's a hell of a story. I mean,
Yeah.
that's a big deal. So, like Dan said, thank you so much for your time and your dedication and your service, not just to this case, but to this country.
Thank you very much. Thank you. And again, thank you for affording me this opportunity to tell the story. So I appreciate that. It's awesome. You guys
So
are
let's
awesome.
encapsulate really quickly the Gray Bird of Baghdad story. This is it in a nutshell, ladies and gentlemen. An Iraqi microbiologist who could seriously help the forces of evil aligned to creating nuclear and biological and chemical weapons to destroy the United States of America and its allies is on the run with a price on his head and countless jihadis chasing him to either kill him or capture him and force him to make the types of weapons that could kill many millions of Americans. Our government unleashes 3 dedicated professionals, constantly holding them back. And yet, those 3 professionals, led by Steve Monteiro, fought through everything and beat everybody to finding this microbiologist and stopping what could have been ridiculous amount of damage. That's the story, ladies and gentlemen. That's a real story. And Steve Monteiro is a man behind that. So, I mean, it's no wonder Hollywood's knocking on your door. And I honestly will. I'll drop some weight. I'll be whatever you need me to be. I'll be in the movie. You know what I mean?
Well,
But
thank you. Thank you very
it is
much.
the stuff of Hollywood, but it's true. And we're blessed and honored to have you on the show, Steve. And we wish you nothing but the best in everything you're doing and going forward. And we'd love to have you on again sometime because we know there's much more to you. We only peel back one layer of this onion that is Steve Monteiro. So please, we'll have you back, okay?
Oh, I'd love to stay in touch. So, and continued success with this. I know it's a great show, and it's going to go on to bigger and better things. So, I'll say that I knew those guys when, and you'll forget my phone number and Steve who I know
Oh,
how that
no.
goes.
No.
So
Tom,
yeah,
tell them how we are.
Yeah.
Listen, we've said this to maybe every guest that we've had on here. There's an NYPD thing, all right? Once you get into our world and we get a hold of you, you are stuck with us through text messages on holidays to, hey, what's up, buddy? All that. You're not getting rid of us.
Oh.
You
Once
are
you deal
part
with
of
us,
our right.
one of 2 things happens. 1, you either piss us off and we drive you crazy, or 2, we befriend you, you become part of our family and our circle,
Yep,
and we never let you go, and you get the best friends in the world.
Oh,
absolutely.
That's it.
no doubt, no doubt, and I know that's going to happen. So, thumbs up, right? All
Outstanding.
right, guys.
So listen, everybody. A few ways to get the Gray Bird of Baghdad. StephenPhillipsMontero.com, Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com. Get this book. It is a bestseller. It is a unbelievable story. And the best part, all true, told by the guy who did it. Not some third party, not some just writer who heard about a story and writes a book. This is from the person who did it. That's what we promised you on the show on day 1, to give you the story from the people who did it. And Steve is that example. All right. So StephenPhillipsMontero.com, Amazon.com, BarnesandNoble.com, The Gray Bird of Baghdad. Unbelievable guest. And we're thankful for that. And with that, like we always do, everyone out there, please pray for all our law enforcement officers out there, military vets. They do an unthinkable job every day without thinking about it. Like Steve said during the show, there's evil, there's bad things that go on a daily basis that we just don't think about. Just do it. So pray for them. And the show, youtube.com @Gold Shields. Hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, hit the little bell so you get all the notifications about the show. We set up an easy way now to get the show on our website, thegoldshieldshow.com. Hit the watch on YouTube button, and it goes right to our channel. And we thank you for everything our audience is doing. The numbers, we can't say enough about. Danny and I don't get wrapped up in the numbers. But every once in a while, because of what we do, we have to take a look at it, and we get blown away every time we do. So please keep it up. And as long as we keep having guests like Steve Monteiro on, the numbers are going to keep coming up. So thank you so much, everybody out there. Again, from my partner, Dan Murphy, Steve Monteiro, this is Tom Smith. Everyone out there, please continue to stay safe, and we'll see you soon.